Welcome back to Franklin Covey's twice weekly podcast on leadership with Scott Miller. 6 years, nearly 500 episodes where I've had the distinct honor to represent Franklin Covey on this podcast, where twice weekly, on Tuesdays and Fridays, we have fascinating conversations with some of the world's most renowned influencers. In some cases, they're academics or researchers, perhaps they're founders, entrepreneurs, CEOs in the C-suite. Sometimes they are record holders, Olympians. Sometimes they're people that have suffered or recovered from some unspeakable tragedy, but all of them, what they have in common is a desire to pour into you, our readers, our listeners, our subscribers, our viewers, to make you a better leader. Franklin Covey, of course, known as the world's most trusted leadership company, founded in part by Stephen R. Covey, who of course wrote amongst many books, the seminal book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Franklin Covey has built a large consulting company partnering with organizations around the world to help them achieve their own great purposes. Today, our guest is a serial entrepreneur, philanthropist. She is a leader. She's in the trenches. Her name is Sheila Lirio Marcelo, and you may know her primarily as the founder of Care.com, amongst other businesses as well. And today we're going to talk about all things around leadership, entrepreneurship. How do you ignite a dream? What questions should you ask yourself around, do your passions align with your talents? And do those align with a market need? Sheila, welcome to On Leadership.
Thank you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. As I mentioned to you off air, it's been kind of an all-star week here in the podcast, interviewing Mel Robbins, who has the #1 book in the world right now. We're interviewing Melinda French Gates, of course, of the Gates Foundation, who is also launching a seminal book. And this morning I was telling my wife the lineup for the week, and she said, yeah, well, who else do you have? And I said, well, I'm interviewing the founder of Care.com. And my wife did cartwheels because she's followed your journey. She loves your service. And so Melinda and Mel, I'm sorry, but Sheila is stealing the show this week. Sheila, do me the favor. Rewind a couple of decades. I'd love to have you reintroduce yourself to all of our listeners and viewers around the world. You were born where? Then what happened? You studied a bit. I don't want you to gloss over that. If you do, I'll remind the audience of it. And then talk about what happened next.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So I was born and raised in the Philippines, and then I came to college in the United States, and I went to Mount Holyoke College. And what was so interesting about going to school there, first time introduced into sort of feminism, because the Philippines had the narrowest gender gap of Asian countries according to the World Economic Forum report. And so that's when really I unpacked being a female leader. But lo and behold, between my sophomore and junior year, met my husband at a party at Yale University, and we got pregnant. And so I became a young mother at a very young age, and then proceeded to work on my career, through grad school, and pursued, strategic consulting, telecom consulting, but found that the challenges of being a young mother was really very difficult. And being raised as a Catholic, it was tough on my parents, and there was a period where they were very disappointed. And so my husband and I felt we were on our own, and my husband had also lost his family due to tragedy. And so we didn't have a lot of support system, which was really part of the inspiration for starting Care.com, and led me to a lot of family businesses. I worked at a company called You Promise to help families save money for college, and then the Ladders to help people find jobs. And I had this calling of solving consumer pain problems. And as I left grad school, and I did pursue my a law degree and a business degree. Being Asian, we were raised as 6 kids with designated professions, Scott. There was going to be a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, I was designated, engineer, all that. And so I started and matriculated my first year at Harvard Law School, but felt like I really wanted to build businesses, and then decided to go to Harvard Business School and applied for the program. But again, juggling having kids at a young age, because at the last year of the program, I don't wish this upon anyone to drink the water at school, but I got pregnant again at the last year of the program. So I found myself with 2 young kids and had this calling to really work on family-based, mission-driven businesses, because I was ourselves struggling with care. I wrote a business plan at a Harvard Business School called MetroMove, which is sort of a modern Zillow today, but decided that I didn't want to just focus on a marketplace of homes. And it was really about trying to find and build a marketplace for care. So built the company, ran that for about 13 years, 13 and a half years, close to 14. Took it public, then ended up selling it to IAC after running it for about 6.5 years as a public company. And then I'm on to my next journey, which is Ohai, and it's family management, personal assistant, helping everyday care coordination. I'm back in the care space using AI to provide an affordable, accessible virtual assistant to help our chief household officer. That's a quick answer to the journey. And it's just fun being a serial entrepreneur that is very focused on a mission-driven business to help families.
That's it? That's all you've done? I mean, that's all you got for me? Oh, your parents are proud. And if they're not, shame on them. Okay, let's talk about your parents. You actually were raised in an entrepreneurial style family. Talk about how that infused, doctor, lawyer, dentist, those goals that were assigned to you and your siblings. I'm guessing you took a lot of this entrepreneurial spirit from watching your parents. Talk about how important it is to ignite in your children their passions, which may or may not be your passions. We all fall into this trap, do we not?
Right. So there's a couple of things I learned a lot from my parents being raised in the Philippines. I had a tiger mom and a very soft, nurturing dad. So they didn't actually fall into the stereotypical roles. The other thing about observing them as entrepreneurs is they very, very difficult ups and downs of businesses, from being very successful running. They did, manufacturing sugar to coconuts, or a lot of coconuts in the early days. We provided the coconut to Mars Bars and Almond Joy, the Mars family. So lots of different trucking. But there were also ups and downs. We moved to the United States. They started different kinds of businesses, restaurant businesses, and some failed, some were doing well. And so they always feared that, as I think many immigrant Asian families, that pursuing professions were going to be much more stable for their kids. And that's why they encouraged, pursuing reputable professions like being a doctor, a dentist, a lawyer, engineer, an accountant. I have each of those in my family. So for me, pursuing sort of the law degree, it's interesting in the Philippines, studying to be a lawyer was considered very prominent to also become business people. So part of going to law school was really to find a corporate career, whether that was going to be banking or consulting. And so that's where my parents were really trying to encourage me versus becoming an entrepreneur. But yet I saw the flexibility, the creativity that they had. I love watching them take risks, because at a young age, I remember that I enjoyed taking phone calls from my mom, because I spoke fluent English in Houston, Texas, and I would answer the phone and do kind of customer service calls for them in their young business. And I just enjoyed that. I remember always following my mom around and wanting to sit and watch her, how she would wheel and deal and sell something on the phone, or when she was working on tallying up numbers. Business just interested me. And they noticed that about me, that I think that, from law school, and I applied to business school, they certainly were worried, but they thought I would still pursue a corporate profession. But of course, in my last year of the program, I started to say I wanted to pursue entrepreneurship. In fact, I had a great offer from a strategy consulting firm that I'd worked through during grad school to help support us as a family. And I ended up turning that down. I worked at HBS for a bit. So I taught a couple of courses, Women Building Business and Information Age Businesses, that introduced me to the internet. Thank God they don't teach any of both of those courses. I'm dating myself for one, and then the other one, Women Do Build Businesses. So I kind of jumped in wanting to work on the internet. And of course, there was a big head scratch. What are you doing? You're graduating from Harvard with a JD MBA, and you're going to go do what? Join the internet? So, they're very surprised. And I described this company, UPromise, after I taught at HBS, and I left that. And it's certainly prominent to have a fellowship and teach at HBS. but jumping into an early stage startup and being a product manager that wasn't getting paid very much was very confusing to them. And I just said, this is going to be where modern technology is going. This is going to help more people. And I think it can really help families. And I was just really driven by that passion. And I just felt like I wanted to apply my skills and my education to build something to help people.
A remarkable journey. Let's take some time and talk about the lessons you learned from founding care.com, right? This became a massive organization. You raised over, I think, $100 million plus to launch this off the ground. Millions of people that are listening and watching to this podcast, they have a side hustle. They have an entrepreneurial dream. They have some goal in mind to create more freedom for their family in terms of stress and frequency and income and all that. Are there a couple of lessons you might distill all of your learnings from CARE into 5 or 6 minutes of think about this when you're designing a solution? Don't shortcut this. When you're raising money, ask these questions. Are there maybe a quick mastermind around entrepreneurship? What do we need to know?
Sure. So just a quick thing. We ended up actually raising $250 million. I wish that it was a lot cheaper.
Sorry.
It was no. I mean, we ended up having to expand to 20 countries, 35 million members to serve millions of families. So it was a big task. I wish I could have raised less, and it was AI time. But so quick lessons to answer your question. I'd say the first one is it's super important, especially female entrepreneurs and even people of color. I think it's to have the confidence to be very data driven. And I emphasize that because there's a confidence of being objective about presenting beyond the passion that you have. And that is really researching the data. We've done that at CARE, and I also did it at Ohai. So back then in the early days, we scraped and really looked and studied Craigslist because there weren't many options to go find care options unless you got that 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper at the local church, and yellow pages were gone. And so we had to really dig for the data. We also bid on SEM. It was the early days of Google to really understand supply demand. And then started to launch the service. We picked the 20 cities to go national. People were scratching their heads, even my investors, like, go national, where you were seeing other marketplaces go in one city at a time. And I kind of explained, well, the data, the demand and supply is especially in senior care. You could be living in Houston, Texas, and then your family is in Boston. And so how did you find care? And so it was important for us to go national, which was my early thesis. And that's part of the reason that data was so critical in the early days. It also allowed me, there's a thing that we say when you're raising money, it's like, it's a hope and prayer in the seed stage. And then as you get later stage, as you're raising more and more money, you really start to focus on even more data. But for me, as a young female entrepreneur trying to prove herself for her first time, I decided I was going to focus on data from the get-go, run my business, have the instruments and access to a lot of the data as we grow the business. And we're doing the same thing at Ohai. I'd say the second thing is, it's interesting, I emphasize data is then the sense of being intense in outcomes, using data, being objective, but be chill with people. It's this balance, it's this duality that you have to learn in leadership and grow, because I had to learn to evolve in the early stages, not only to be objective and data-driven, but to really understand what it meant to lead people. Because even though you're in the technology business, everything at the core of it, even with AI, that there's people behind all of this. And so how did you, evolve, especially as a founder, all the way to running a public company? So much of it is that balance between being objective and also being a really caring and intuitive leader. And how do you evolve doing that? And so the third, very related to both, is what I call being authentically bold, meaning having a sense of self-awareness. But there's a duality in this self-awareness in these words of authentically bold. How can you be both? How can you be both vulnerable and confident? How can you let go and not be attached to something, but yet have a discipline and an ambition for getting an outcome? And so there were lots of these dualities in managing this authenticity, but it starts with self-awareness and an inner confidence so that you can put yourself out there, be transparent, take risk, make statements to allow your team to follow and have the boldness. at being an entrepreneur. So I'd say I'd summarize, those are kind of the three lessons that have just been important in my life and continue to be as I lead and really focus on social entrepreneurship on my journey.
Sheila, easy question, hard answer. What's the most consistent mistake you see entrepreneurs making across the board? It's like one thing stand out that if they could just step around that pothole, you could have so many more successful businesses that perhaps fail or don't succeed like the visionary hoped.
I would say, it's related to this evolution and self-awareness that I think is super important. And related to this is you can be super passionate about something. And this is this duality of having an emotional passion towards an idea, but at the same time being super honest and objective with yourself around what is the data saying to test that passion. And then that's where the evolution part is super important, that you've got to have the inner confidence to believe in that passion, but yet be detached enough to really understand the data and to evolve and morph your idea if necessary. And I think sometimes the pride and the passion and there's a tenacity that we have as founders, and you need that. But you also need to be self-aware. When is it time to let go, be open, but not lose your confidence in yourself around the ultimate vision of why you started this in the first place? So I think, and it's really helped me a lot as a founder, going from startup to growth to then, pre-IPO, and then even running a public company.
It's riveting. I'm listening to you. I would like to know a little bit of prognostication from you around what the world's going to look like and what skills do people need. Just today, FranklinCovey released our interview with Reid Hoffman, of course, the co-founder of LinkedIn and one of the largest visionaries and investors, quite frankly, in a lot of AI initiatives. My wife and I, Stephanie, your fan, your number one fan, we have 3 young sons that are 10, 12, and 13. And I occasionally like to ask our guest, what skills are our sons going to need in the next 5 to 7 years to be able to thrive in what is likely going to be an unidentifiable world? You hear these AI proponents, investors, inventors, implementers talking about the world's going to look radically different even a year from now. 4 months from now, they were saying, 3 months ago, they were saying, 2 to 3 years, and 6 months ago, they were saying 3 to 5 years, and now you're hearing more of these AI-forward leaders saying, no, the workplace is going to look radically different 12 months from now. Prognosticate and tell everybody, every chief people officer, anybody who's listening and thinking about their own skill set, including parents for themselves and their children, what does the workforce need from us in the yet identified but clearly sort of present world that's coming?
Thank you for that. And, honored to be being interviewed like Reid, who, by the way, was an early investor, a friend and mentor to me, and invested in Cure.com. And I've learned so much from him. And so for me, it's very related to these early answers that I talked about. Certainly in this world of AI that's being predicted to replace a lot of jobs. And I've talked to one of the big banks, and is a very good friend. He and I were on a board together as CEO of it. The analyst jobs, he believes, are still going to be around, but the emphasis on really knowledge of data and getting very comfortable, because the differentiator in so much that we're going to be building out at the core of each of these companies and the skills around really about the data. Important, right? And then the second is sort of really learning around user interfaces, whether that's B2B or whether that's moving towards a consumer, whatever desired business that you want to try and build out. Both are equally important, because understanding the objectivity of data that drives what we're offering because of this AI world, but then how do users interact? And by the way, when I say user interface, that can move from anything from robotics to could be user interface of new ways of interacting digitally. So all of those things are important, but at the core of it, I think what's going to distinguish leadership is actually connection. It's interconnection. I think there's a movement of increasing consciousness around this world that's going to differentiate the leaders that remain connected. And so our young kids, how do we make them competitive in a digital world and understand the tools, but really learn the skills? I mean, if I think about why I'm back at it again is, Ohai is trying to free up the mundane task of every day so that we can free up parents to sit down and have meals with their children, so that they can have quality time. They can enjoy reading a book to them, right? We can certainly assign that to an AI, but we never want to take away the importance of teaching each other, the importance of human connection. That's what's going to differentiate the leaders, and the skill sets for the kids. And it's the same thing that I've taught my own boys. We eat every meal together. Certainly now they're both older, 32 and 25, but when they were younger, we ate meals together. We emphasized that. We read them books. We spent time together. We made eye contact. We would have guests come over and I'd make them sit down, have meals with them, and really have conversations so they felt comfortable. Many of my friends who are also running big firms and leaders of companies, we talk about this all the time, this importance of connection, but it all starts with interconnection, a certain sense of an emphasis of really believing your core of goodness and wanting to give back in the world, and this sense of really caring deeply about you so that you can in turn care deeply about others.
You clearly exhibit a growth mindset. It's obvious you have an insatiable curiosity. What is it you engage in to keep yourself fresh? Is there a book you've read recently? Is there a podcast you listen to? Is there a person you follow and read everything she or he writes? Give us some insight into how you stay so insanely relevant in a world that is, quite frankly, overwhelming to a lot of us that can't keep up.
Yeah, I tend to spend a lot of time actually meditating. I have an entire practice where I spend time on transcendental meditation, and then I do holotropic breath work, and then I even do cold plunges and steam bath to kind of get myself into the zone. And then in terms of materials that I read Letting Go by Dr. Hawkins, a book called Internal Family Systems to better understand, not just for me, but also a better understanding of how I lead certain people. And that's for really everybody on what kinds of things motivate us. What are the barriers in our life? What are our triggers? I tend to spend a lot of time around thinking about behavioral psychology. Adam Grant is a dear friend and a good friend. So someone who truly inspires me, and a lot of his books. And I certainly follow him, and I just saw him at Davos at WEF and continue to have a depth of conversation with him. I tend to want to collect a lot of people in my life. I even host a dinner series and talk about connection called Care to Gather that I do once a month in my home, and different topics. I just did one on longevity last night, and I bring different speakers where I'm actually the moderator, and I invite often mostly women. And part of this, Scott, I was motivated around this Care to Gather because as I moved to New York last year, one of the things I noticed, speaking on the topic of connection, is I got invited to a dinner called Human Unicorns. And I found myself as the only woman there out of 20 seasoned CEOs. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to do something different about it. I'm going to create a connection series of my own in my own home and invite people for different dinners on different topics, whether it's climate, whether it's longevity. I support an organization called Mothers Entitled, and that's women who decide to take a pause. I support an organization called Illumine Impact, which is putting women on boards. And I just did a dinner with Brian Moynihan in my home. So I have found that, yes, you would ask me about resources of books and things. I find my true live connections with people, of this desire and this inner curiosity I have. And I've even turned to moderating and just interviewing people live in my own home and having a group of about 24 of us. And I do that about once a week or every other week. I'm learning a lot from people, just having these direct live conversations.
The irony is not lost on us that for being an enormously successful tech entrepreneur you're talking a lot about connection and interpersonal connection and how important it is to focus on it, to nurture it, to sustain it, to have the self-awareness and the introspection to know what's it like to be in a relationship with you, what's it like to be led by you, what's it like to be on a team with you. I find that very validating for someone who has spent the better part of their career and risk and fortune of building technology systems to make people better connected. You are very much evangelizing the in-person connection and how important that's going to be in an AI world. I can't help but ask you about Ohai. It's on your screen. You've mentioned it several times. Talk a little bit about this new venture that you're obviously so passionate about.
Yeah, so it's family management. It's a virtual assistant that's accessible and affordable for all to take care of your everyday care coordination activities, whether it's calendar conflicts, whether it's reading your 11-page newsletter email from school and you're missing that 8 font and you mispicked your day for your kids. It's this solving this problem similar to the care economy problem that was so near and dear to me. It's this, on average, Scott, 4.6 hours women put in for unpaid labor and 2.8 for men too, which is why I call it the chief household officer. And it's just extra work that we do. And it becomes more difficult for us to stay connected to our families, spend quality time for our kids, because we're such busy people, and there's a cognitive overload. We have app overload, email overload, just constant digital world that it's interesting. Just like Care.com and now Ohai, I'm really leveraging the power of technology to allow us to be. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it's how can we be more connected to each other by using the power of technology to allow us to be more human.
My well-educated spouse is our chief household officer. Can it solve her 6 hours of laundry every day? I feel so bad. I see my wife walking between the 3rd floor and the 1st floor where the 2 washers and dryers are, which we're fortunate to have. And I feel like all she does all day long is walk back and forth, washing the boys' tennis clothes and their school uniforms. And my wife looks by, she walks by. I saw her this morning and she had a stack of clothes that was 3.5 feet high. And I looked at her and I'm like, I'm sorry. And
it's a lot. There's a lot. Eventually there'll be robots. I'm super excited about that, right? So I think that can also help with laundry. But it's this overload. And Scott, we estimated that if we just saved 1 hour, and I remember talking about this similarly in the care economy, if we just saved 1 hour a day of unpaid labor, especially for women, 44% of the workforce, $1 trillion of GDP per year. That's the size on average of 2 countries. And I remember I had a similar thing around the care economy, and I know I was one of the first and joined by a very dear friend of mine, Ai-Jin Poo, with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, where we talked about care as the work that makes all work possible. And it's the same here in my approach to Ohai. If we can free up just this overload of the things that we worry about, imagine that not only driving the economy, but nutrition would improve for our children. The fact that we're there for them means that in terms of their upbringing and really building up their inner confidence as we launch them in life, because we're freeing up ourselves more to care for others more, to love others more. It's just my life's work, and is my journey around realizing that after Care.com and selling it, I just had more work to do. My job wasn't done on how we can make a difference to really help families.
I rarely, if ever, ask this question, but how can people follow you? Because I'm riveted listening to you. I'm going to leave this podcast. I'm going to re-listen to it, which I never do because I hate listening to myself. But you've given me a lot to think about as my own entrepreneurial ventures are consuming me my need to make my time more efficient and continue my connection. Like you, we have a lot of commonalities, right? We are fiercely focused on our boys reading, connecting. We also host monthly dinners at our home with interesting people on topics, and our boys participate and they sit and they listen.
I'll fly in.
Well, it's stunting their ability to connect with their 10 and 14-year-old friends, but they're the bomb in front of CEOs and senators, right? I mean, they can hold their own. How do people follow you? Do you have a blog? Do you have a Substack? How can people learn from what it is you're learning?
Yeah, so Sheila Lirio Marcelo on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Also on Instagram. And I pretty much respond to people. I get a lot of heartfelt notes and really try to, stay connected as much as I can. Adam Grant's been really encouraging me to get my book out. So I'm looking forward to that, and probably will consider doing a podcast and some other things down the road. So I'm just thankful for you, Scott, thankful for Adam, thank you for Reid Hoffman and so many other people who mentor me and encourage me in my life to share more of my light, to inspire whoever I can, to also give back and just love people.
Sheila Lirio Marcelo, founder of Care.com, founder of Ohai, and numerous other philanthropic and socially motivated interests of yours. It's been a delight to talk to you today. Look forward to having you back in about 18 months when your book comes out and we talk about all the lessons from your book. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Scott.
And we'll see you back here next week for a new conversation on leadership.